The fracture has begun as it pertains to MAGA. And on today's As the World Churns, myself and my fabulous co-hosts, Andy Levy, are going to dig in to what we think are the beginning fissures of MAGA's own creation. So what do I mean by this? For years, Donald Trump, along with his band of fools, has dug in to the conspiracy theory of a Democratic cabal of sex trafficking pedophiles, et cetera, et cetera. And when I'm in power, I'm going to release the Epstein files and show the world who the Democrats are and yada, yada, yada. Fast forward, Pam Bondi, I got the files on my desk. Fast forward, libs of TikTok and other personalities walk out of the White House with a big binder and smiles on their face. We got the information. And now they said there's nothing to see here, folks, and just keep moving along. We got nothing. We got nothing to see here. Donald Trump is melting down because his own base now has Alex Jones crying in his car, Elon Musk feeling like he was made a fool of, among others who are just like, if you're not in the files, then release the files. And we know now that Donald Trump is throwing everything that he can, bringing up outdated feuds with people, bringing Hillary Clinton and the laptop from hell and going on these long old man screeds on his broke down social media platform. And what it's showing, Andy, is that for the first time ever, the man is being ratioed on his own site with his own people saying, you're a liar. What do you make of this? Because I'm like, is this the beginning? It's going to be the Epstein files, not the deportations, not the gutting of government agencies, not like the grifting, none of that. It's going to be Epstein.
Well, this is the first time that when Trump voters say, this is not what I voted for, that I believe them. Like, this is the first thing he's done where I'm like, yeah, you know what? The guy ran on the fact that there were these Epstein files, that it was the Democrats who were suppressing them, and that he was going to release them. So yeah, when I hear people getting mad at him now, and now that he's out there, and he really is flailing, it's amazing. Like you said, the old man yelling imagery is just unbelievable. And look, you can't tell conspiracy theorists what they want to hear for years, and then suddenly say, oh, by the way, none of that's true, and expect them to stick with you. You can do that to a lot of different people, and so he can do that on a bunch of other subjects and get away with it. But conspiracy theorists aren't like that. They believe what they believe, and they believe it with every fiber of their being. And they believe that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered to be kept quiet. They probably believe that Hillary Clinton had something to do with that murder. They believe that there is absolutely a client list, that Jeffrey Epstein had a client list. They also believe that was a Mossad agent, or in some way worked for the Israeli government. And so everything that Donald Trump and his administration is doing now flies in the face of these strongly held beliefs. And yeah, it's wild that the thing that's fracturing this group, and that I mean, who knows? We've counted old Donnie out a million times before, and he somehow comes back. So I'm not ready to, I'm not ready to throw a party just yet. But I guess in a way, it's really not a surprise that it would be one of these, wild conspiracy-laden issues that would lead to this fracturing. Because again, like the people who are saying, when he deports or kidnaps whatever one of their neighbors who were saying, I didn't vote for this, like, yeah, you did.
Mm-hmm.
You actually did. You might not have thought it was going to go down like this, but it's what you voted for. And the same with all the cuts. Yes, they voted for cuts. They just didn't think the cuts would affect them. And,
Mm-hmm.
they fucked around and now they're finding out. But that's different from saying, I didn't vote for this. Because the man made it clear that he was going to do all these cuts. So again, this is something as wacky as it is and as bizarre as it is that this might be the thing, like you said, with all the other things, with the shredding of the Constitution that's going on a daily basis. Ultimately, I guess, and maybe with hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense.
But it's like, here's my thing. And I'm not even saying like this is the beginning of the end of Donald Trump, but I think that it's really interesting that the seeds that you planted, the conspiracy seeds that he has been planting over the last 10 years, that he has poisoned his own well, right?
Yeah.
Like that he's planted these seeds in his poisonous garden that he's allowed to spread because it has always worked to his benefit. The control that he had over this base has always worked to his benefit. And it made me go back to, if we remember Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony before the January 6th committee, where Donald Trump was told that the people that were on the grounds at the ellipses had weapons, right? And Donald Trump is saying, they're not here to hurt me. Take down the magnetrons. Take them down. They're not here to hurt me. I believe that Donald Trump has never imagined, couldn't even possibly
Sure.
imagine that this base that he's been feeding lies to, that he has riled up conspiracy after conspiracy, lie after lie, fed them, Nancy Pelosi, her husband gets bashed in the head, feeds them this person, they have to move, right? Like feeds them all of these people that he never thought that they would turn on him. And so now here he is, like standing before these people, sending these middle of the night paragraph long truth socials. That's like, what about the laptop? And what about Obama? What about Hillary? Like, what about this? And you can just imagine him like in his bathrobe, holding a
Mhm.
Coke and just screaming out into the void. And the people who used to stop and camp out and listen to everything that he had to say are like, you sound like a liar. Like, I can't actually trust you. And I
Yeah.
think that that fissure, in terms of him not having the control to manipulate these people, to me, that's really something. I'm not saying it's the beginning of the end,
Mhm.
but I think that it's
Right.
like, huh, look what you did.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And that look, and there was no reason for him not to believe that whatever he said, they would ultimately go along with because they have, like you said. But the problem here is that when the Trump administration comes out and the Justice Department says there's no Epstein list, there's no there. There are two possible explanations for that. One is they're telling the truth, and the
Yes.
other is that they're covering it up. And you've got people who firmly believe that this thing does exist. You've got an attorney general who said the list was on her desk. So it's a little difficult because those are the only two possibilities here, that they're covering it up or that it really doesn't exist. And you have people who, even if it doesn't exist, they are never, ever, ever going to believe that. Never. And he thought, well, if I tell them that, they'll believe it. And he was absolutely wrong. And we're seeing now, these fissures, even within the administration, with people threatening to quit at the FBI and other people calling for Pam Bondi to be fired as if this was her choice. Like that really gets me. Like, again, fire her. She sucks. But do you think she's doing this? You think that's where this stops? You don't think this goes all the way to the big guy? I mean, who are you kidding? Like you can't be that stupid. You can't think that Pam Bondi is going rogue here. This is a Donald Trump operation. And so I'm not sure what the people calling for her to be fired, what they think they're going to accomplish there, other than making me laugh. And that's something. In
It
this
is
world,
something. In
that's
this
something.
world, at this time, that's
Yeah.
something. And
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Thank you, Megan Kelly. So Danielle, over the weekend, a lot of government workers started losing their jobs, whether they were administration people or actual workers, who might actually do something for a living. And I think it was on Friday, the State Department announced that they were beginning the process of firing over 1,300 U.S. based employees in an effort to, I guess, to reshape the entire State Department in Donald Trump's image, which I feel like maybe we had some advanced warning he was going to do stuff like this. Like there was that project. I can't remember the name of it. It was some kind of number. Maybe what year is this? Oh, 2025.
2025. Yeah.
Yeah. That explicitly called for all of that. So we've got multiple crises in the Middle East. We've got
Hmm.
Russia and Ukraine not going anywhere. We've got God knows how many other hot spots and simmering spots throughout the world. And we are firing 1,350 people from the State Department, Daniel.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think that
Yeah.
nothing bad will happen. I think
Yeah.
that losing all of this intel, the literal intelligence of decades of work and workers in the State Department seems like a logical thing to do when America is as unstable as it is. And because of America's instability, the world is now incredibly unstable. So I think good call on their part, adding to the joblessness, which is going to add to, the I designed chaos that they have created in this country. But, again, it's not as if there wasn't a 900-page document that was a PDF on the Heritage Foundation site that was bounded and put out to the world to say this is exactly what is going to happen. This is not going to be like the first regime. This is going to be wildly different because they are very organized and know exactly what they want to disseminate. To destroy. And that's what we're doing. That's what they're doing. So look, it all goes back to the fact that the damage that has been done in these initial 6 months is generational damage to this country
Yeah.
that we're
Yeah.
never going to see fixed in our lifetimes. Like that's just like the fact. And that's just, again, 6 months. They are breaking this country up, selling it for parts, and the destruction, I believe, is going to come back to them. And you are beginning to see that. But, when people, you look at what's happening with FEMA, look at what we've realized with Homeland Security. Kristi Noem, doesn't send aid, doesn't send emergency aid for 72 hours because of a stupid policy that she put together that she needed to have her signature on expenditures of over 100,000. Now we're seeing that calls were missed with FEMA because of the massive amounts of layoffs, that people are dying because of their stupidity. And if you think that that's something that folks are going to shrug off, they have another thing coming.
Yeah, for sure. And let's talk about that FEMA thing for a minute, because first of all, we trash the New York Times on here a lot. I think it's fair to say. So we should give them credit when credit is due. And
Correct.
it was their reporting on Friday that on July 5th, which was the day after the big storm hit Texas, the day after the flooding, when people desperately needed help, more than two-thirds of the phone calls that FEMA received on that day were not answered. Why? Because Kristi Noem laid off hundreds of contractors on that day, contractors among whom whose job was to answer those phone calls from people who needed help, from people who needed emergency help. On July 6th, FEMA received 2,363 calls. They answered 846. They answered roughly 35%. On July 7th, they received over 16,000 calls and answered 2,000. That's 15%. That is criminal. I don't know any other word to use for it. We talked on the last show that the fact that she had put those other restrictions in place should already get her hauled before Congress and, as far as I'm concerned, should land her in prison. This is worse. This is even worse than that. They literally, on purpose, unstaffed call centers in the middle of an emergency and did not pick up calls from people in distress, from people who, I'm sure in some cases, whatever issues they had can be dealt with a couple weeks from now. I'm sure in a lot of cases, they needed to be dealt with ASAP. People are drowning. People's possessions are being washed away. It is unreal to me that she cannot get away with this, is I think what I'm trying to say. She cannot be allowed to get away with this. And it should start right now. And hopefully the Democrats will make good. I know some of them have already called for her to be hauled before committees. If nothing happens to her while this administration is in office, the minute this administration is out of office, charges need to be filed. Like, she cannot be allowed to get away with this. And it's just, I don't know why this one, out of all the ones that we've talked about, but there's something about this one. There's something about the pure, unadulterated evil of saving a few bucks by not staffing call centers with freelance people, contractors. They're not even staff. They're not even people you have to give benefits to and shit like that. They're fucking freelancers who probably got paid, minimum wage or whatever. And you decided, I'm not going to renew those contracts I can't. I know this isn't the fuck that guy segment, but this one really got to me, Danielle.
But here's the thing too, because it is so unadulterated and it is so vile, and we have to really know that it isn't to save any money. It is to divert money from what you would have paid those contractors and those people into Donald Trump's and his donors' pockets. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But my
to
thing,
ICE.
and to ICE. But my thing here too is, do we really think this is Kristi Noem? Just in the same way that we were talking about Epstein before.
Right.
It's Donald Trump. This is Trump.
Oh, for sure.
This is Elon Musk. So yes, should she be fired? Should she be jailed? All of these things. But if we think that this fucking, Ice Barbie CVS makeup wearing, cheap person is the mastermind behind the destruction, that's not the case. That is putting lipstick on a pig, right? So I just, the entirety of it is coming into such sharp focus in just a handful of months, right? In just 6 months, the damage, the lives that are already lost, and how that's going to increase over these next years. My God, somebody will have to go to jail at some point, but I don't have faith that the right people will.
No, and look, I'm with you. And yes, I 100% agree with you that, in the same way as we were talking earlier, that it wasn't Pam Bondi who made the calls. You're absolutely right. It's Trump policies. I think my point is, she needs repercussions, because there needs to be a message sent to all the people who carry out Trump's wishes that they need to think twice about that. That they can. The thing is, I don't know that this will happen. And, and they may end up finding out that they don't have to think twice about it. And that's the problem, because if you had any kind of repercussions for doing Donald Trump's bidding on a thing like this, or following Elon Musk's precepts, but then you got in trouble, the next time they tell you to do something, you might say to yourself, or someone else might say to themselves, well, look what happened to her. Well, he's rotting in a cell. I'm not going to do that just because he says I should. So that's why I think there have to be repercussions for her. She needs to be hauled before Congress, because this shit cannot be allowed to continue. Because, like you said, they've shown us in a very few months how they want to operate for the next 3.5 years. And it's only going to get worse if there's no downside to them personally for doing what they're doing.
100%.
Dr. Annie Andrews is a South Carolina pediatrician and Democrat who, at the end of May, announced her decision to take on Lindsey Graham by posting a campaign launch video that quickly went viral. She joins me now to talk about that video and why Graham has to go. Annie, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So before we even get into your decision to run against Lindsey Graham, one of the things that you say is you're a pediatrician, not a politician. So tell our audience about pediatrician Annie Andrews.
Yes, thank you so much. A pleasure to be here. So I actually decided to be a doctor when I was 4.5 years old. I told my preschool teacher that when I grow up, I want to be a doctor and a mommy with 3 kids. And I know that because my preschool teacher wrote it down and I drew a little picture next to it and my mom kept it. Now it's framed in my home office. So I was laser focused on this career of being a doctor. No idea where I got the idea from, but that's what I did. I'm a goal-oriented person. I achieved that goal. I spent about 15 years working in the Children's Hospital in the Low Country of South Carolina. And I really loved my job as a pediatrician in a children's hospital. But when you work at a children's hospital every day, you start to understand there's real systemic barriers that are impeding our children's ability to grow into their brightest possible versions of themselves. And if you don't work in a children's hospital or you don't work in a public school, then you might not understand how common it is to care for kids who are hungry, who don't know where their next meal is coming from, kids who are in the throes of a mental health crisis and their parents can't access mental health resources for them. Kids who heartbreakingly have to spend the night in the hospital room alone because their parents are juggling multiple jobs just to make ends meet. And then what really got me off the sidelines was the children I'd cared for who had been shot. When I envisioned a career as a pediatrician, I thought I'd be taking care of kids with pneumonia and diabetes and asthma and seizures, and I do all of that, but I never thought I'd see so many children with bullet holes in them. And so after 15 years of understanding all these problems our kids are facing, I started to look for problem solvers in my state capital in Columbia, South Carolina. You won't be surprised to hear I didn't find very many folks fighting for kids there. So I got more and more involved in advocacy, started to understand the political process, realized I was more than qualified to run for office. And so that's what I did back in 2022 when I ran for Congress against Nancy Mace. And that's what led me to this moment, as you said, last month or in May, when I decided to run for the U.S. Senate against Lindsey Graham.
So talk about that great campaign launch video in which, among other things, you show Graham flip-flopping with examples of a clip of him railing against journalists who call Donald Trump a kook, followed by a clip of him calling Donald Trump a kook. As I said, this video went viral. Did that sort of pleasantly surprise you?
Well, interestingly, my launch video for my congressional race against Nancy similarly went viral. And I think it's a combination of things. I think, I'm not a traditional politician. I don't really consider myself a politician. I bring my lived experience as both a pediatrician and a mom to everything I do in the political world. And I am a very real person who talks like a real person to regular people. I'm not going to do this just to sound like every other Democratic politician. So I co-wrote this ad with my ad team, the same team I used back in my congressional race. We did a lot of back and forth. And I'm not going to do this to play by the rules, to play by the old playbook. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to try to unseat an entrenched DC politician like Lindsey Graham, I understand I'm going to have to do it my own way. And that's exactly what this launch video reflected. It's the frustration that we all fear, the anxiety we feel from this Trump administration. It's Lindsey Graham being the very epitome of what has gone wrong in the Republican Party. He has changed his position on nearly every issue in the 22 years he spent in the U.S. Senate. And I think people hear pediatrician and mom and they expect me to be one thing. And that's not exactly what I am. I opened the video by saying that Lindsey Graham is full of shit because he is. Why can't we say that? It's okay to say that. We are in this, urgent moment in this nation's history. We've got to try new things. I'm not going to do this and abandon who I am as a human being. And so that's what came through in the launch video. I'm so pleased it went viral because that's more eyes on my campaign and more ears listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth about the things that I care about.
Yeah, you mentioned that you ran against Nancy Mace, and obviously and unfortunately you lost, and now we have to, on a national level, deal with hearing her and seeing her repulsive statements and videos on what feels like a daily basis. And I was looking at Lindsey Graham's margins of victory. He won by 10 points in 2020, 15 in 2014, 15 in 2008, and 10 in 2002. So he's never even had an opponent come within single digits of him. How can you be different?
So first, it's 2026 is going to be unlike any election cycle that I have experienced in my lifetime. The chaos of the Trump administration, Lindsey Graham has enabled every step of this chaos, and people in South Carolina are feeling it, whether it's the tariffs, on and off tariffs, and how that's impacting the South Carolina ports, whether it's how it's impacting South Carolina farmers and small business owners. Lindsey Graham just championed the bill to gut our nation's Medicaid program, which funds half of the births in South Carolina, at least 6 out of 10 nursing home beds, and is the largest insurer for children in my state. So people are feeling that direct connection to these failed policies to their daily lives. My job as a pediatrician in South Carolina has never been about red or blue, and I don't see politics that way either. And I know that sounds a little naive or Pollyanna, but everybody's ready for something different than what Lindsey Graham offer. And, this is a midterm election year. Trump is not on the ballot like he was in 2020 to save Lindsey Graham when Jamie Harrison ran against him back then. Also, that was COVID, so Jamie's team could not knock doors. We won't have that handicap this time. So this is just a totally different race than the last time Lindsey was on the ballot. And his approval rating is lower than it's ever been. It's 34% in South Carolina, which is 10 points lower than Donald Trump's.
Wow. I have a theory that South Carolinians keep sending him back to Washington to keep him out of South Carolina.
Listen,
it's just a theory.
I keep saying, let's send Lindsey home, but by no means is that an invitation to actually come back. I'd love for him to find a place to live, maybe in Florida.
Yeah, he really is a national laughingstock at this point. Republicans don't even respect him.
That's exactly right. I mean, he has a Republican challenger for this 2026 race of his. So he's going to have to spend all this money during the Republican election cycle because MAGA Republicans are unhappy with him. And of course, all Democrats are. And you just called him a national laughingstock. And that's exactly what he is. It's embarrassing to identify as someone from South Carolina because first, that means Nancy Mace, and second, that means Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
We deserve better. He's had these 22 years in the Senate to deliver for South Carolinians. And if you look on any important ranking, whether it's, maternal mortality or public education or infrastructure, South Carolina is failing and he has failed us. And my pitch to people who normally vote for Republicans is, let's just try something different for once. Give me 6 years. I promise every vote I will take will be in the best interest of South Carolina's children. And if you don't like what you see at the end of those 6 years, then just elect the next Republican who comes behind Lindsey Graham. But we can all agree that we don't need another term from Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, for sure. So as a doctor, I'm guessing that watching RFK Jr. and his cronies destroy our national health system is one of the big issues for you. Am I right?
Absolutely. I think that's really what was my tipping point. When I lost in 2022, I didn't necessarily plan to run again. Certainly didn't anticipate I'd be running for a statewide office like Senate. But it's everything that happened since Trump got inaugurated. Most importantly to me, the healthcare provider, the appointment of RFK Jr. to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. In our launch video, there was a cartoon brainworm that winked at the audience, which was one of my favorite parts. But yeah, this is a coordinated attack on our nation's healthcare system, whether we're talking about these devastating cuts to the Medicaid program, cuts to Medicare, slashing NIH funding, just the fact that we now have a conspiracy theorist and grifter leading this department is doing untold damage to our healthcare system, our public health infrastructure, and the public's trust in healthcare providers. That is going to take us decades to recover from. Even if RFK Jr. retired today, it would take us decades to undo the damage he has already done. And he's only just getting started. So I see this as an incredibly urgent moment for healthcare providers like myself to get off the sidelines and run for office at every level. And we have to stop this madness now, or, who knows what could happen to healthcare in America.
Yeah, it really does feel almost like it's like an exponential issue. Like every week that RFK is in charge and Trump is president, we lose another couple of years of progress, or it's going to take us a couple more years to get back just to where we were before they started this whole thing.
I totally agree. And a lot of people, I think, are hearing this idea of Medicaid cuts, not really even understanding what the Medicaid program does in this country. It is the literal backbone of children's healthcare for sure in the U.S. and an incredibly important building block of our entire healthcare system. And when you take that much money out of any system, it's going to impact far more than the people it directly impacts. So as hospitals are looking at their bottom lines for hiring for the next year or two, they're making really tough decisions. Maybe a hospital was going to hire 10 new respiratory therapists, but now they're only going to be able to hire 2 because they're facing this huge Medicaid budget hole in coming years. And that means when you show up in the emergency department, even if you just fell and hurt your wrist, there's going to be fewer resources available to more patients who are sicker because they don't have access to primary care. So our emergency departments are going to be overrun. The wait times are going to be really expensive, and the hospitals have to pay for that care somehow. So if they have all these unfunded former Medicaid patients showing up to receive care, because you know what, people are still going to get sick and they're still going to get hurt. The hospitals have to pass that cost on to someone, and they're going to pass that cost off to private insurance companies, which means that those of us who have private insurance, our premiums are going to go up really fast and really high. And so this impacts everyone. You can't take this much money out of a system and expect the system to continue to function.
I feel like you just explained that better and more quickly than pretty much every national Democrat in office has done over the past bunch of months, which is both a compliment to you and sort of a railing against them, because the way you put it is perfect. And it should be so easy to explain this to people and how it's going to affect them. And I guess that's why we need more people like you.
That's why we need more. Thank you for that. And that's why we just need more people with lived experience in other professions. That's what the House was meant to be. That's what the Senate should be. Politicians shouldn't be a career choice. It should be something you do to serve your community, to solve problems, and then you go back to whatever your profession was. That's how I see it. I didn't daydream of being a member of Congress. That is not my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is to solve the problems that I saw every day as a pediatrician in the children's hospital. I see being a senator a path to solve those problems. And that's why I'm doing this, solve some problems, and then go back to being a pediatrician, because I promise you, I guarantee that's a better job than being a member of the U.S.
So we're not going to find anything from your nursery school teacher that says you wanted to be a senator your whole life.
Absolutely not. If you talk to any of my college roommates, my childhood friends, even my friends from 10 years ago, they'd say, Annie is doing what? Because this was never part of my plan.
Yeah.
It really is what I saw every day in the hospital, that I gotta address these problems, and this is a way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. South Carolina has, I think, some of the most restrictive reproductive rights laws in the country. I'm assuming and hoping that's a big issue for you.
Yes, absolutely. I was on the ballot in 2022 when Roe fell, and it became a central point of my campaign back then. And it will continue to be. Yes, we have essentially a total abortion ban, no abortions after 6 weeks in South Carolina. There were headlines just a couple days ago of a woman who suffered a miscarriage and was handcuffed and arrested. So it was one of the most anti-woman states that you can imagine. And I know as a doctor that abortion is just not a healthcare issue. It's also an economic equality issue. It's a human dignity issue. And when you rip away reproductive freedom from women in a state like South Carolina, not only is that morally bankrupt, but it also has incredible ripple effects on the economy. And we have Lindsey Graham, who honestly, if I had a list of everyone in America whose opinion I want to hear about women's reproductive health care, Lindsey Graham would be very close to the bottom of that list. I don't know why he feels compelled to open his mouth and talk about this issue at all, but he's done great damage to access to healthcare, to reproductive health care for women in South Carolina. And I plan to bring that up often on the campaign trail and hold him accountable for the damage that he has done.
But isn't he then going to say that you are radical and crazy?
Of course. And that's why we tried to get ahead of him on that by talking about that in the launch video. Look, I know what they're going to say. They're going to tell you that I'm radical and that I'm crazy, because that's what weak men do when they feel threatened by strong women. And in my case, strong women who have a background and expertise on these issues that they don't have. And, I want people to understand that I am not some, DC born and bred left-wing Democrat. I'm literally a pediatrician and a mom who just is trying to solve some problems. And I am proud to run as a Democrat because I see Democrats in Washington, D.C. fighting to protect Medicaid, fighting to pass a child tax credit to lift millions of American children out of poverty, fighting to pass common sense gun laws like background checks. I see Democrats fighting for South Carolina's kids and families, and that's why I'm proud to run as a Democrat. But by no means am I a career party person. I believe in term limits. I believe members of Congress shouldn't trade stocks. I'm not in this for myself. I'm in this for the people in South Carolina.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we talked about, which I guess are sort of the obvious things, our healthcare system, reproductive rights. What are the other big issues that you think are facing America right now?
It's really, I think about it, two additional issues. It's the chaos and corruption. The more I dug deeper into, why South Carolina's legislators weren't passing laws to benefit South Carolina's kids and families, I understood that the root of so much of this is corruption. Lindsey Graham doesn't actually care one way or the other about Medicaid. He just wants to cut the program from the budget so he can deliver tax cuts to his billionaire donors and the corporate PACs that fund his reelection campaign. So we've got to address these career politicians that honestly exist on both sides of the aisle who are not really in it for their constituents anymore. We've got to get the chaos and corruption out of our politics in Washington, D.C. And then the second thing is the thing I talk to families about every day I'm working in the children's hospital is affordability. Families whose wages have not kept up with the cost of living, who can't afford to live in the towns where they work. They don't know if they can put food on the table for their growing family, and prescription drug prices are out of control. Childcare costs are out of control. So as a party, we have to get back to letting voters know that we understand their problems, that we're there to listen, and then to work with them to identify solutions. And any Democrat who's running for office now who's not talking every day about affordability is not on a winning path.
Yeah, it's such a good point. You mentioned the corporate PAC money fueling Lindsey Graham. How much of that corporate PAC money will be fueling your campaign?
Exactly $0. I will not take any corporate PAC money.
That's fantastic. Are you worried, though? Because Jamie Harrison raised, well, I think it was like a record for a senatorial campaign. And as we discussed earlier, he lost by, 10 points. Are you worried about the funding? Are you worried about the fact that Graham has all these, his rich cronies that can basically fund attack ad after attack ad on you?
So I know that to be true. I know that tons of dark money will flow into this election once they start to see how much money that I'm raising. My campaign is powered by grassroots. In this first month of fundraising, and the end of this quarter, we had over 38,000 individual donors. Our average donation was $31. We're really breaking fundraising records for a challenging Democrat in the South right now. And so I feel confident that I can raise the resources necessary to run the kind of campaign we need to run against Lindsey Graham to send him home. I do understand that money in politics has got to go, but we can't change the rules until we start winning elections. So right now we have to play by their rules, which means I've learned how to be an effective fundraiser. And the difference between 2026 and 2020 when Jamie ran is two things. It's midterm versus presidential year. Democrats have a much easier time in South Carolina. Every time it's a midterm, Trump is not on the ballot to bail Lindsey out this time. And then we're not dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic in the way that the Harrison campaign was. I got in this race 18 months before the general election because I know it's going to take that amount of time to raise the resources and to build the ground game necessary to get out the vote in South Carolina. But there are enough voters out there. South Carolina is not a red state. It's a non-voting state. We have to give voters something to believe in. We have to talk about what we will do for them, not just what we are against. And that's what I plan to do in every corner of the state of South Carolina over the next 17 months.
How can people get involved in your campaign?
Yeah, so they can go to drannieandrews.com to learn a little bit more about me. You can sign up there to volunteer, and you don't have to be a South Carolinian to volunteer. You can text bank and phone bank from anywhere. You can donate on the website. And as I said, this is a grassroots powered campaign. We do have donations from all 50 states, and I'm proud of that fact because everyone is tired of career corrupt politicians like Lindsey Graham. So even if you can only give $5, you can do that on the website, drannieandrews.com. And then please follow me on social media. I have a lot of fun there because I will not let them steal our joy. I'm Annie Andrews MD on Instagram and formerly Twitter, and I'm easy to find everywhere. But please follow along and let's give people something to feel hopeful about in 2026.
Excellent. Annie, thank you so much for being here. And obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on this race. And we very, very much would like you to send Lindsey Graham, not home, as you said, but just packing somewhere.
Somewhere else.
Thanks, Annie.
Thank
Yep.
you for having me.
Folks, I am so happy to welcome back to As the World Churns my friend, Dr. Jonathan Metzl. You know him as the author of the New York Times bestseller, Dying of Whiteness, as well as his other New York Times bestseller, What We've Become, as well as all of the talks, interviews that he does with so many people, including myself, on a regular basis. Jonathan, we are 6 months in to the Trump regime, 6 months in. And I want to get your thoughts on how you've been feeling, experiencing this moment, talking about this moment to your students at Vanderbilt and on your travels. 6 months. How you feeling?
Is 6 months? Is that right?
Yes.
Like, it's, it's funny because like I was thinking back to like I was just trying to imagine like I teach this class, COVID and Society is one of the classes I teach at Vanderbilt. We do this assignment where we tell the students to go back to their pre-pandemic self, like find some excerpt of themselves from before the pandemic, listen to your voice like it sounded before the pandemic, watch a video or clip or Instagram, TikTok, something of that, and then write one page talking to yourself back then, telling yourself then what what you know now. And it's a intense exercise, right? But it's kind of like, we made that joke on this when I talked to you the last time, but like think about like the guy who lived through the 3 years of what became the 100 Years War. And he's like, I can't believe I lived through 3 years of this shit already, not knowing that there's 97 more years to come. And so I do think there's an increasing acceptance that we're in this is kind of our reality now. But it's just funny to think about even before the election, like I was looking back on some interviews I did before the election. And so part of what you learn in that experience is that things are unexpected. Things are on different kinds of trajectories. We narrate our lives often based on what's happened before, but often what's coming is more intense, but also that things that seem just freaking bonkers, if I can say freaking, are, become your normal reality, right? And so honestly, for me, the Trump stuff is not super surprising. He told everybody this is what you're gonna do,
Yep.
and this is what he did last time, and this is who he is. But for me, if I had to think like what is the reality that I could not have possibly imagined, I have to say it's the division on our side. I mean, it's actually the fact that we're so fractured. Like I just can't imagine like before it was like, oh, Trump's going to win, and then we're going to do the march, and then we're going to do the thing, whatever. But whoever's like pulling the chains here is really good at fracturing us. And now you see it happening on the other side. Like somebody's turning half of MAGA against the other half of MAGA. And so I feel like we're caught up. I mean, the issues obviously are real, but I just feel like it's the division on our side that is leading to like isolation, mistrust, like we're kind of cannibalizing. And to me, that is the by far the biggest risk is how can we think about our alliances in a way that is are going to resist what's happening now. Do you have that feeling also?
I'm gonna say, so two things. One, I want to come back to your pre-COVID exercise because I think that even as you were saying it, I was like, shit, that's really wild, and I should do that. Like, and look, I mean, I've done so many recordings. You and I have done so many recordings. I wonder what it would be like to listen to 2019 Danielle, 2019 Jonathan, and then fast forward to 2025, and like you said, listen to the changes, your voice, conversation, like all of these things. I think that would be a wild thing to do. So that's one. I want to come back to that and like what has come up for your students. But I think about the fracturing a lot. And today I just did Democracy-ish with Waj, and that's what we were talking about was the fracturing that's happening with MAGA with regard to trust and the Epstein files and like all of these things, these fissures that they planted, they created, right? They created this conspiracy theory, and then now they are being eaten by their own creation. With regard to Democrats, however, you and I are going to have a differing opinion. And my feeling is that I absolutely do not trust Democrats. I absolutely do not trust the establishment. I actually do not want there to be a coming together. I do want there to be a breaking apart. And the reason I say that, and I've said it on this show and so many others, is because I have worked as a Democratic strategist. I've worked on Capitol Hill. I have worked for progressive think tanks. I have been inside of, the Beltway and this work for nearly 20 years. And what has come to pass for me over the last 10 is that Democrats are a large reason as to why we're here. And their inability to let go of their billionaire benefactors, their inability to decide to actually listen to the people instead of try and control the people. And they are revealing themselves, particularly right now in New York City, as Cuomo just announced, guess what? He's still running. Even though New York City said, guess what? We don't fucking want you. We don't care about your legacy name. We don't care about, what you've done and how you're trying to find your way back into the grips of power. And yet all the establishment who kicked him out several years ago because of his grifting, because of his dealings with women, all lined up behind him. Why? Because they don't want to back the progressive. Why? Because it threatens their own power. And so for me, when I think about the breaking apart of the Democratic Party, I'm saying good.
You could see me chomping. I was literally chomping at the bit, but I'm not going to turn the tables and interview you. Even that's what I want to do.
Do it.
No, because I want to know. And let me just say, first in his defense, Cuomo was a changed man after the ayahuasca ceremony. And
Is that right?
But I will say that, what does that breaking apart mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? Because it's, you can say there are two parts that I think complicate that. Number one is, does that mean we fracture and tribalize more? Does that mean other people get power and then they're trying to control other people? Because beyond just their question of power, if we break apart, somebody's going to emerge as being in control, and then their job is going to be to dictate things for other people. And so it's not like we're going to break apart in the name of a more egalitarian society. So that's question A you can answer. Or question B you can answer is, isn't that breaking apart also being manipulated? It is true that maybe the chickens have come home to roost because of this Epstein thing. But it's also probably true that some bots and some Russians and some other people are manipulating the algorithms to turn MAGA against each other, which hasn't happened before. So there also is an externality of this kind of division showing up in ways that are incredibly more than happenstance, I'll say, in a way. It serves somebody else's interest. And so it's not like I'm not denying what you're saying, but it's not like it's just happening organically. It's also that there are bigger forces at play of this kind of breaking apart into a million pieces. We saw it before the election with Kamala Harris. We've seen it a bunch of other times. And so you can pick whichever one of those two you want to answer.
But here's what I'll say. I'll take the manipulation piece. We've been manipulated, right? America is the master manipulator of the larger global society and has been, right, since its inception, right? We've all been indoctrinated into a certain degree to understand these characteristics that we thought were foundational to the morals and the values of this country that are not actually true, that were just based on a series of lies that we were told was the American story, and we understand that's not. I do believe that there is a manipulation that has been happening around MAGA for the last 10 years, both external and internal, both organic and inorganic. The fact is, though, is that when you tell people not to trust their own eyes and not to trust what it is that they hear and they see, is that, guess what? Eventually they start not to trust you either, the person that told them that everything was a lie. And so where we are is, I think that we are in the midst of the great crumbling of the American empire. I think that a lot of things are being revealed. I think that a lot of truths are being revealed. I think that there has been tons of manipulation by both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party on behalf of a billionaire class that was manipulating them to their own needs, right? And now we all see that. Well, wait a minute. You've been taking money from all the same people, but telling us like two different stories. Democrats telling us to be grateful for the crumbs that we get and putting on a cosplay show of resistance. And then Republicans bearing their true selves, right? Like taking off their hoods and showing the world who they are. So yes, everyone is being manipulated, right? I go back to my favorite scene from The Devil Wears Prada, where she's talking about the color cerulean and she's saying, like, you don't even know what you like. What you like has been chosen for you by a group of people in this room. Like, that is the truth of the world. And I think that more people are recognizing that than have ever recognized that before. There is a collective awakening that's happening. So for me, what is the great fraction? I don't care. I just care that it's happening because I know now that the people that I had actually put my faith and trust in over the last 2 decades of my political career, I do not trust. And I realize do not have my best desires and needs at heart, that they have consistently shown me over and over again what they're really about. And it's not the people.
Well, but the question then is like really, where does that leave us? By the way, we're gonna run out of time before I talk about my trip to Europe, stuff like that. But I mean, isn't there a point where we're gonna have to negotiate with people in many different tribes, some of whom we agree with, some of whom we don't? The fantasy of burning it all down, we're great at the burning, but then what comes next? I mean, I'm just thinking so much about my book about guns,
Mm-hmm.
where we were so great at developing all these policies that we never admitted it, taken guns away from certain people who really care about their guns. My book, which I'm now going back to calling How We Lost, which really was the original
You
title.
changed the title?
I mean, that they wouldn't let me call
I
it
know
that.
they wouldn't let you
I had
do
to
it.
call it,
Yeah.
Kumbayaville. But now I'm going back to the original title because the whole idea was liberals. I had an idea of what gun owners should do, which is believe in public health. Public gun owners saw public health as incredibly intrusive and controlling for a government they didn't believe. And so then liberals, when gun owners didn't play along, they said there must be something wrong with you. You don't have common sense because we are the arbiters of common sense. And so part of the story is it's no wonder for me gun control failed, because public health is a value that you believe in government, you believe in cooperation, you
Mhm.
believe in a higher power, whatever the hell. And so, but we never, that wasn't their viewpoint, right? That wasn't their world. And so to really get like gun safety, what I argue in the book, as you know, is we really have to take seriously the concerns of many conservative gun owners and then work with them for their version of safety, which might be a totally different paradigm than ours. But there was a day after for me, which is we have to understand that there are other paradigms other than public health that function for a lot of the country. They don't, because public health implies governments and they mistrust the government. Now, that seemed crazy 3 years ago when I wrote it, but now many people on our side mistrust the government, and it doesn't seem that crazy because the tables are turned. And so isn't there a day after where you have to, like, is the idea of the of the crumbling or burning it down or whatever, that it all falls apart and then we all like have our little like fortified neighborhoods? Or is it that ultimately we figure out new ways of engaging with each other? Is it that we want to, I mean, how does this not end up in a power vacuum, just given how things are, is kind of
I
the
mean,
question.
we're already in a power vacuum.
Yeah.
Like, I think that that's the thing. It's like, how do you expect to come together when people are just finally starting to realize that they've been bamboozled, right? Like, there can be no great coming together when what is being revealed to us most deeply, using New York City as an example of what is happening between Mamdani and the Democratic establishment, is that when you are seeing things through a lens that is not rose-colored anymore, you have to reckon with what you've been taught. You have to reckon with what has happened and unpack that before you can even begin. It's like going to therapy. I go to therapy for one reason, right? Like I want to understand myself better. I want to understand my patterns so that when they show themselves, I can disrupt those patterns. But first, I have to actually examine what those patterns are and how they were showing up in the first place. So to me, to jump to the place of reconciliation and how we speak to each other, we don't really even know what language we're all speaking right now because we've become so fractured, both by outside manipulation, but also by things that we haven't wanted to reconcile with as a country, right? Which is our attachment and our need for racism, which is our attachment and our need for misogyny, which is our attachment and our need to always have an oppressed other in order to keep certain power structures like intact. And so I think that you have to understand that truth before you can even begin to think to yourself, like, what does it mean to move forward? Like, there has to be a breaking apart first.
Well, what about, I mean, to use the New York example, like, I mean, obviously, Mamdani's gonna win, and so
but see, you say obviously.
okay, fine.
How?
Yeah,
We have billions of dollars are going to be poured, millions of
okay,
dollars are being
okay.
poured into this, so we
Let's
don't really know.
But I'm saying, let's say Mamdani wins. What about people who disagree because they're uncomfortable with socialism or with his stance on the Intifada or because of the taxation? I mean, aren't there going to be people who just totally disagree with what he's doing, right? And so the question is like, is the role then to bridge those divides? Is it like we're in power now? I mean, I guess it's my concern. I don't mean this probably isn't even a question. My concern is the tables just flip and then we just are seesawing back and forth of like zero sum who has the power and stuff like that, if that makes
But
sense.
we've been, see, here's my thing. We haven't actually been seesawing back and forth between two distinctly different factions. We've been seesawing back and forth between the same power manipulated structure that is owned by the same group of like 10 billionaires.
Mm.
So if Mondani wins, that is actually a extraordinary shift and breaking of a seesaw that has been balancing back between two parties, one that has become overtly racist and the other one that's just racist when they need to be. Hence Gillibrand's anti-Islamic screed that she went on, but somehow she still has a fucking job, but she's a Democrat, right? Like, oh, it's not so bad. But when Nancy Pelosi throws a bunch of women of color under the bus, it's just like, oh, she's a strategist and this is really about the whole party. Is it, or is it racism? So like, if Mondani wins, that is the severing of a seesaw that's been balancing itself between two parties that have been in it for themselves for different reasons. And then we can have a conversation if, in fact, he's able to create a government, and I'm not saying that he's going to be able to, but if he's able to get people who have been disaffected by city government to actually join city government, right? To actually break apart these structures that were put in place, the pay to play with the hotel industry and the taxis and the Ubers and the this, that, and the other thing, and restructure in a way that is people centered, then that is going to be an incredible reckoning and like a case study to follow for years to come. But there's a lot of ifs that are there. But I think that the possibility of him going from zero recognition to now being stopped every two steps that he takes on the street is an exemplifier of this awakening that is happening where people are like, they both fucking lie. And you can't tell me that this guy is an anti-Semitic and tell me this and use all the same tropes and bullshit that you've been doing because now I'm hip to the patterns that you all rock with and I don't want to be a part of them anymore. So it's like, for me, that's the people saying, okay, so they both suck. So we're going to try something radically different. And that's always what ends up happening when you get to a place of people being fed up enough.
I mean, something big is happening because it's happening in Tennessee also. It's not just here. It's happening in a lot of different places. And so it'll be interesting. I mean, I'll be going back to Tennessee in a couple of weeks. I know we're just probably out of time here, but I would love to just keep tracking this, because there are so many I mean, it's funny because like even on Woke AF for years, you and I would
Mm-hmm.
talk about what does it mean to burn it all down. And I guess like I still am an institutionalist in a certain kind of way, in that I'm just worried about anarchy, for example. And so I guess the question is just like kind of what does that mean for institutions? What does that mean for building? What does that mean for collaboration? And I've actually seen so many of these issues play out on the right as I've been studying the right for 20 years. So it's interesting to see this conversation happen now, predictably, I think in certain ways on the left.
Well, let me ask you this one last question, though, because I want to go back to the exercise that you had your students do. What comes up for them, right, when they're looking at these two different versions of themselves and the two different versions of society that has been created in in the time that they're coming into understanding themselves and the country and all of these things? Because you teach undergrad, right? Like, so they're young. What comes up for them?
It's always a version of I can't believe how naive I was. And
Mm,
that's good or bad, right? That's good because maybe the world's more complicated than they realize, but it's also bad because maybe that means the world is becoming less safe or more violent or something like that. But it's always a version of like I was so naive back then. I didn't even before I could even conceptualize that there was going to be a pandemic or going to be whatever is coming next, and so it's some version of that, which maybe happens anytime you an exercise like that. Maybe that's just the automatic outcome, but it is a kind of version of I was so naive and the world was easier than it was easier for me then, or something like that.
mm. Well, we will leave it there today, my friend, but we'll continue this conversation because it is an incredibly important one to be having right now. Thank you, Dr. Jonathan Metzl, for making the time for As the World Churns.
Anytime, and I had a great time in Europe, so I'm happy to talk about that also. Great, keep talking.
So, Andy, as we kick off yet another week in this godforsaken wasteland that is Trump's America, who is your fuck that guy?
I said something nice about the New York Times earlier, so now I have to trash the Washington Post because we can't be completely nice to legacy media, Danielle, as you know. It's in our non-existent contract. So the Washington Post has a new opinion editor. His name is Adam O'Neill. And he introduced himself to the staff on Monday with a memo. And I'm going to read part of that memo. He writes, advocating for free markets and personal liberties will be critical as we rebuild trust with more Americans. And he says, this is not a partisan project, and we will welcome robust debate within those twin pillars. And then he says, it's also important that we communicate with optimism about this country in particular and the future in general. So this guy is saying that the Washington Post opinion section will be full of optimism about America and about the future as Donald Trump kidnaps people off the streets and
Mm-hmm.
sends them wherever he feels like it on a given day, where the Supreme Court itself seems to be trampling on the Constitution. The list is endless. We've discussed it all on this show. And this guy wants an editorial page that communicates with optimism about America and advocates for free markets at a time when billionaires are getting richer and richer and richer and more powerful, and the rest of us are very much not. There's a meme or a joke that we always see. It's like, this is the future liberals want. This is the future Bezos wants. This is the opinion page Jeff Bezos wants. He wants an opinion page that advocates for free markets, i.e. no taxes for him.
Correct.
He wants an opinion page that communicates with optimism about this country while Donald Trump is president, because he does nothing but kiss Donald Trump's ass so he can continue to pay no taxes and accrue power while the 99.99% of Americans look around like, what the fuck is going on? So this is gross. This is disgusting. This is the trashing of a newspaper that gave us Watergate reporting with Deep Throat. I'm fairly certain, I know that wasn't on the editorial page. I'm fairly certain, though, there was nothing optimistic about this country in reporting out Watergate, in reporting out a crooked president. and ultimately leading to a president resigning. But Jeff Bezos seems to want to go. Bezos seems to want to go the other way now, and you have to wonder, like, if Watergate, if Bezos had owned the Washington Post in 1972, 73, 74, would we have had Watergate reported? Because I'm not sure we would have, because it would have made the sitting president very unhappy, and Jeff Bezos doesn't want to do that. So for all those reasons, my fuck that guy is, I guess, Adam O'Neill, but sort of as we were talking earlier, where ultimately it goes to the top, I guess it's ultimately Jeff Bezos.
Here's the thing. I think that this is wonderful advertising for independent media, because
It's
you
true.
absolutely know that these corporate billionaire owned outlets do not give a fuck about you. So if you want to know the truth about what is going on, aside from the fact that the Washington Post has put basically everything behind a paywall, you can just count them out for any type of in-depth coverage of the world that's going on. Just open up your window and stick your head out to get the fucking news, because they ain't gonna provide it for you. Fuck those guys.
Yeah. All right, Danielle, close us out. Close out this first of the week segment. Who's your fuck that guy?
So here's my thing. I got to stay on the Epstein for a moment. I really do, because, you know, when you take all these things into consideration about, like, again, how wealthy, powerful white men are treated with kid gloves, how their wrongdoings are covered up, all to protect power and people's proximity to that power. There is no better example right now than the Epstein cover-up, right? Like, there is absolutely nothing better. For a group of people, these MAGA folks, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, and other folks that got to their current positions by talking about the deep state. We're gonna undo the deep state. And it turns around. Guess who's in charge of the deep state now? You fucking dummies, right? So what has Kash Patel's FBI done now, other than tell us that there's nothing to see here, folks, as it pertains to the Epstein files and Donald Trump and releasing them? Well, now the FBI has dropped their investigation into Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. Couldn't have come at a better time for Prince Andrew. I mean, we know that his mother, the late queen, spent her last years trying to do everything in her power to make sure that, you know, the world hated Meghan Markle so much that they did not realize that her son was a fucking sex trafficking pedophile. And so here we are, where Kash Patel, now in charge of the deep state, has decided, oh, there's nothing to see here as it pertains to Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein, which we all know is a fucking lie, which is more red meat for now Donald Trump's aggrieved and rabid base, who is coming for all of them. One can only hope that they catch them. But who is my fuck that guy? You know, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and all the MAGAs that made their careers off of saying what truth they were going to get to, just to turn around and be like, nope, sorry, don't have anything. And oh, what did Kash Patel say the other day? It's above my pay grade. Sir, you're the director of the FBI. Actually, nothing is above your pay grade. That's the job. Fuck that guy.
There's a great quote, I guess, in The Sun, the British rag, about Prince Andrew. And it says, hopefully with this out of the way, he can at least leave the country. What's he supposed to do with the rest of his life? Am I supposed to feel bad for Prince Andrew? Like, even if he weren't involved in the Epstein scandal, the thought that I would for a half second feel bad for Prince Andrew, what's he supposed to do with the rest of his life? I don't know, get a job? Just a thought.
Just a thought. You could work for a living.
Yeah.
Some of us do it.
Yeah. Fuck all those guys.